Hey, Andrew.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Still getting set up here. Okay. Okay. I don't know if Chip or Bradley will be joining us. They're both home sick today. Share my screen. I just put the agenda up here. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yep.
To check one more thing. Okay. So we'll get started. We're a couple minutes, starting a couple minutes late here. As I note in the agenda, we're not planning on presenting any slides or demos. We're just going to talk through stuff that we've been working on. And I put links in here to some other documents that describe our progress in case anyone is interested in following up or learning a little bit more. I just got word from Chip that the spring meeting will be at Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, May 2nd and 3rd. That's a Thursday and Friday. So we were hoping to get that settled a little earlier to give people more time to book travel, but we're still at least seven or 8 weeks out. So hopefully we will see all of you there. So we're gonna just talk about our completed tech work and our upcoming tech work. And then we will give you guys a chance to express any concerns or talk about features you want or need, directions moving forward, that sort of thing. And as we go through this, feel free to ask any questions as we move along. So I will start. We're going to do me first, then Kelly, then Christian, because we're sort of the stuff we're working on is grouped together by person. All right. So the completed work since the spring meeting, we did finish the restoration spot tests. So you guys have probably each gotten an email sometime in the last month or so saying that we automatically restored a bag, and we ask you to check it out. All of the bags that we've restored so far have been valid and complete, according to the reports from all of you. And a couple depositors got the same bag 2 months in a row. That's not supposed to happen. Part of the reason it happened was we have some criteria around what bags we will restore. And we try not to restore bags that are too large. We don't want you to have to verify like a whole terabyte bag to make sure that that's intact. So we were picking bags that were only 20 gigs or smaller. We're going to raise that limit because some depositors only have one bag that's 20 gigs or smaller. We also ran into a new issue that we had never seen before. We got a file, I think it was from Notre Dame, that had control characters embedded in a file name. And the one specifically that caused us trouble was a control character for the delete key. I don't know how that got into a file name, but it looks like the contents of that bag were processed by BitCurator. And I don't know if BitCurator does anything with the names of the files it processes. But the problem there was that we got to a certain point in processing the ingest, and then the ingest service gave up and said, I can't continue with this. What it should have done is just reject the bag from the start as invalid. So you will see that rule going forward. If you try to send us file names that have embedded keyboard control characters, we won't accept the bag. And it's interesting that we're like over 4 years running, and this is the first time we've actually hit this issue. So that's the extent of the work I've done on the Exchange services. I've been working mostly on the Dart rewrite, and again, the point here is to get Dart to a state where we can maintain it for the long term, and where we can have other developers from other institutions contribute extensions and fixes and things like that. So we want a fairly clean, well-tested and well-documented code base. That's what we're aiming for on the rewrite. And also modular, the initial version of Dart, the prototype, though it worked, the code was quite a tangle internally, and it would have been very difficult for others to contribute that, and it was difficult for us to maintain. I was hoping to have the most basic features of that Dart rewrite, the minimum viable product that lets you upload bags to AP Trust. I was hoping to have that done at the end of February. It looks like I'm still probably 2 weeks out from that point. And hopefully when I get to that point in a couple of weeks, that feature of being able to bag and upload to AP Trust will be working both from within the UI and from the command line tools. That's another new part of Dart that we did not have in the prototype. So at some point, you know, it should be able to ease the process of you guys scripting, you know, batches of bags to be created and sent up to AP Trust. Do you guys have any questions about that? Okay. You guys can't hear me, right? Everyone's on mute, like
Andrew.
literally.
Oh,
Yeah.
we hear you, Andrew.
Okay. Okay.
What do you have planned for the initial transfer mechanisms to be included in Dart?
So the very first one will be S3, but I'm pretty sure that FTP will be behind that, possibly SFTP. All right, do you have specific requests?
rsync.
rsync? Okay. Just making a note of that. All right. Yeah, I'll put in a ticket for that.
Does go ahead, I'm sorry.
Dart is implementing pretty much everything as plugins that you can swap in and out. So one transfer call protocol will work as well as any other as long as there's a plugin for it. So I will figure out how to write an rsync plugin. All right. So the full release of Dart is sometime later this year, and I haven't nailed that down yet because I have a little bit of scheduling up in the air, which I'll get to in a minute. But the full release should implement all of the features listed in that overview document that is linked to the agenda here. And it should be ready for other developers to contribute new plugins, which means we, by the time of the full release, should have full developer documentation for Dart, as well as some user documentation and training videos. Item number 2 on my upcoming work is to begin the process of tag indexing. So I got a request from Georgetown to index the bag group identifier tag in older bags that they uploaded to AP Trust in the months before we actually started parsing that tag and storing its value. That work request from Georgetown overlaps with a feature that we will be on the hook for in this IMLS grant that Aviva Weinraub and Sybil Schaefer and a few others are working on. That grant says that distributed digital repositories such as AP Trust, Chronopolis, and DuraCloud should, at a certain point, when they start accepting a new common Bagot format, they should parse out and make searchable a certain handful of standard tags from the BagInfo file and possibly from one or two other files. So the IMLS grants, there are funds written into that grant for us to actually do this work. AP Trust is supposed to be the first distributed digital preservation repository to implement that feature. So they wrote in some budget for us to do that, and they'll be paying for it. We're supposed to start the work in late 1919 and have it, or late 2019 and have it done in early 2020. But I think the tags will be defined before then, hopefully by summer. And so since there's so much overlap between what Georgetown is asking for and what we need to do for this grant, I think I'm going to start that work early in parsing out those tags and making them searchable, because there's another feature we're on the hook for in that grant, and that is to implement some kind of versioning, at least as an option, early in 2020. And I was surprised to learn on a call with Chronopolis that they don't actually implement versioning, and DuraCloud does not have a real versioning implementation either. So none of us distributed digital preservation repositories seems to have a full and proper and robust implementation of versioning. Typically, these repos keep the latest version of whatever intellectual object you've given them. And I can see there being some cases where depositors are going to want more than that. Anyway, that's something we will be looking at in early 2020. I think it'll be a substantial amount of work. And so I want to work on the tag indexing a little earlier than that. So that'll probably be something I'm doing late spring, early summer. And again, that involves actually combing through all of these bag info and AP Trust info tag files and pulling back the tag names and values. Finally, go ahead, Suzanne.
Oh, just wanted to say thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no problem. Finally, I had a call with AWS last week, and they are giving us early access to Glacier Deep Archive. This is the storage option that is $12 per terabyte per year. And I was wondering if any of you depositors would have a need sooner rather than later for this option. And again, because it's Glacier, we're not doing fixity checks. We're just storing the material there as a cheap kind of fail-safe option. And you know, it's all in the list of objects and files, and everything will be in our web UI and REST API. So we already have one person, Lauren Work, has already indicated an interest in this. But does anyone else see a potential need for this Glacier Deep Archive service in the next 3 or 4 months?
Andrew, is that $12 per terabyte per year? Is that the cost to AP Trust from Amazon, or is that the expected cost to AP Trust depositors from AP Trust?
That is the cost to AP Trust from Amazon, and Chip would have would have details about what we would charge, but I don't see it being substantially higher than that. And again, no fixity checks on that. The material is all encrypted by default using AWS managed keys. And the restore time on objects from Glacier Deep Storage is a minimum 12 hours. It's typically 12 hours plus however long it takes to copy the object back into S3. So, you know, a 100 megabyte object might be 12 hours plus 5 minutes. And a 1 terabyte object might be something like 24 hours.
Andrew, I think I've read too that for Amazon Deep Glacier Deep Archive, whatever it's called, content has to remain in, or is at least billed for a minimum of 120 days?
I think it's 180.
180,
actually.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's because it's designed not to be a high turnover type of thing, right? Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I forgot about that. You know, if anyone does see a need for this in the very near term, like the next 3 months, let us know. It's actually not an enormous amount of work for me to to activate that. It'll probably just take a couple of days, maybe 3 days out of my schedule, and that's it. But let us know. Kelly has been working on two-factor authentication. She can tell you about where that is.
Yeah, so that's what I've been focused on since the fall meeting, winter meeting, whatever we're calling that. And right now we're in the testing stages of that, so it's almost finished. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to roll it out really soon for you guys to start testing yourselves on our demo environment, and give us any kind of feedback you have on that before we roll it out in its finality. So the way it's going to work is it's going to be required for the AP Trust administrators and the institutional administrators, and then there's going to be the ability for institutional administrators to turn on or enable two-factor authentication for users at their institution or for their institution as a whole. So not everyone will be required to use it, but if you would like everyone at your institution to use it, that is an option as well. So if an institutional administrator enables it for the entire institution, then individual users won't be able to turn it back off for themselves, because that would defeat the purpose. So we, and the decision to do that was just based purely on the poll that we sent out. That was what the majority of you, and I think the majority was like 6 versus 5, but that was how we made that decision. That was what the majority of you seemed to want, so that's what we did. There will be 2 options for verifying your phone numbers for two-factor authentication and for logging in, and that's going to be with the Authy mobile app, where you can get a push notification, or via SMS text messages, so you can get a one-time code. So we tried to split the difference. So if you prefer not to get text messages, or you work somewhere where you don't have service, you don't need to use those. And if you wanted to get like a mobile token or a push notification, you can do that too. So hopefully that makes the majority of you happy. And we can always talk more about that in the future as well. So that's the basics. The onboarding process is, we're going to roll it out first to the demo environment to do some testing, as I mentioned, so you guys can check it out, give us some feedback, but it should be bug-free at that point. And then when we go live on the live repository website, you'll have 30 days if you're required to use two-factor. You'll have 30 days to enable it and verify your phone number. After the 30 days is up, you will be required to enable it and verify your phone number. And the way that is going to look is you'll just be redirected back to your user profile, which is where you have to do those things over and over and over again until you do it. So you won't be able to access the rest of the website until you've enabled two-factor authentication. So I would suggest, if you have the incorrect phone number listed on your page, to go ahead and update those now or sometime during that 30-day grace period, because afterwards, if you don't, you're going to have to contact one of us to update that phone number, and that'll be more of a hassle for everybody involved. So get on that early. And yeah, does anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay, so I don't have an exact ready date for that, but we're working out what hopefully are the last of the bugs right now, and I'm hoping to roll it out sometime in the next 2 weeks or so, I guess, to the demo site. So hopefully really, really soon. Once that is finished, I'm going to be moving on to writing a Swagger document so that we have some better documentation of our REST API. That's going to be priority number 1 after the two-factor authentication is finished. And I don't imagine that I'll be working on that 24/7. So while I'm doing that, I'll also start to evaluate the Pharos UI redesign that Andrew's kind of scoped out a little at the fall meeting. So that's what I'll be working on in the next couple of months. Any questions about those things or any other requests?
Just a comment, Kelly, about the Pharos UI design.
Yeah.
That was sort of, we didn't discuss that in great detail at the fall meeting because I think we, like always, ran out of time for stuff. Although it did sort of come up as something that, and we had the links to some of the wireframes. And I think it was pushed out maybe over email once, but I wonder if that's worth having a separate dedicated call for, or specifically dedicating time at the spring meeting where we absolutely focus on it, because I think that's pretty important type of thing there, where we want to make sure we have lots of eyes and people taking a look at the Pharos UI aspect. It might be good to make sure that we do have time and eyes on that, as opposed to just sort of blazing along like we always do, because we're always trying to do so much.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had meant for people to talk about that. And I will talk to Chip and Bradley about the agenda for the spring meeting. If there is room, we'll get it in there to at least start the discussion. If there are points that are contentious or very complex, we would have to follow up on those with a video call like this. So let me talk to Bradley and Chip about getting it on the spring meeting agenda, and I think whether it's on there or not, we'll probably wind up having a call about it as well.
Yeah. Any
Thanks.
other questions for me?
All right, Christian, you want to give us your summary?
Sure. So I did some work behind the scenes, like I always do, that you usually don't see. I implemented some so-called life cycle policies on all S3 buckets for all members that remove old files that are left in store buckets or receiving buckets. Like sometimes when a ingest fails, and correct me maybe, Andrew, if an ingest fails, it won't remove the file from the bucket. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the ingest fails and it's not because the bag is invalid. I think even in some cases where it's invalid, I have to go back and check the rules, but yes, there are some cases where a failed ingest will just sit in the bucket for a long time.
Yeah. So we had quite a few buckets actually that had some data in it that was in there for a long time. And those lifecycle policies now clear those data remnants every 60 days for production and every 14 days for receiving buckets in production. And then we store buckets every 14 days. So you don't, sometimes you may restore a bag and then you have it in your restore bucket, but you won't download it or you won't delete it after you download it. And it just sits in there and causes some cost for us and ultimately for you. And so those buckets are getting cleared out now automatically. And then for S3 in particular, there's a thing called incomplete multi-part upload. So if you upload a bag to an S3 bucket and the upload gets interrupted for some reason, it keeps those parts, those chunks out of the upload in the bucket. But you can't see them. They're like invisible to you. I don't even know if you can see it on the API. I don't think.
You can't, no, there's a special API call to see them. but they're invisible and they cost a lot of money.
Right. And it's kind of interesting that AWS doesn't clear those automatically as a default, because I feel like that happens quite frequently. But anyways, those are getting deleted now too, every 7 days. And I think I calculated in the end, it was about $1,200 a year for those data fragments and remnants in the buckets that it producing cost. So those are gone now. Then I automated a new member setup for AWS accounts and the infrastructure, like setting up accounts, account names, and buckets. Previously, we had that manual, and it's very tedious to do. I know that we don't get members very often, but also not all members get set up the same way. Like way before I was there, members set up that were set up differently than they're set up now. So that's all streamlined and set up. So if we get a new member, it's I'll just create a data dictionary of the members and the organization and fire that script up, and it will create all those things on AWS. And retroactively, I did that for all existing institutions too, and applied it to all the accounts. So we have we know that all the accounts are set up consistently, including those S3 bucket policies and S3 logging. So we do object logging for any data that leaves or enters the S3 buckets too. And there's some outstanding work on the admin API for Pharos sometimes that the Pharos work could be automated too. That you don't have to go in there manually and create accounts manually. I automated the Dart builds for macOS, Linux, and Windows. We use Travis CI and AppWare CI for Windows and Travis for Linux and macOS. Then I automated the documentation builds, which is like a JavaScript module that Andrew uses. That with every push to the repo, it creates or updates the documentation for the code and puts it on that AP Trust GitHub IO address. I implemented more restrictive permissions for the account that is used by the Exchange services for ingest and restore. Previously, that account had access to all S3 functions, so in theory, it could have deleted buckets or done other malicious things if somebody had like committed some malicious code into the Exchange services. And now that's all restricted, and it's only the real minimum that the services need to function, they have access to. Then I spent a lot of time on Docker containerization of Pharos. At the meeting last year, I actually had that done already, but it's fairly simple to put an application into a container, but the whole infrastructure and orchestration around it is a lot of work to make sure that you can deploy it repeatedly and easily and roll back however you want to. And I've been working on that, rewriting some of the Ansible scripting that we use currently to deploy stuff to make it work with the Docker deploys. And then upcoming work is more Docker containerization, word, for the Exchange services. I work on the deployment, and when I roll out the containerized applications, I'll also roll them out on new AWS instances. Currently, we have a C4 instance. It's maybe 2 years old or so for ingest services, and the new instances are faster, have more bandwidth, and they're cheaper too. So that will be part of that rollout. And then for the preservation buckets that we have, there's no policies right now in place that add another factor of safety to, like, right now I could go in there and by accident delete the whole preservation bucket, which would be pretty bad. So I want to look into having some more restrictions on that, that you need I don't know, a second factor or something to do destructive functions on preservation buckets. And then there's another piece that I'm going to be working on is setting up, and they are already set up actually, but I haven't communicated that yet, individual AWS user accounts that are the same accounts that we have in the firewall systems that have their own credentials, and then whenever somebody deposits something, we can see it in the logs as the person depositing it, not the institutional account that everybody has right now. In addition to that, we'll work on another role for firewalls that has that is an institutional account, where some institutions have servers or services that are used to deposit materials into AP Trust, and they are not tied to a specific user. So we want to have the possibility for institutions that can use those central instances and have their own accounts and access credentials. And then a part of that, which I have to work on still, is a yearly AWS credential rotation of the keys, because some of them are pretty old. They're like 2014 or so. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but yeah, I want to refresh those. Any questions to any of this?
The bucket lifecycle policies, has that been information, is that now on the wiki somewhere in the technical documentation?
No, I haven't updated the documentation for a little while. No, I don't think I added it there.
It'd be good to have it there, because I could see a question arising about what happened to this or where did that go, and it'd be sort of a place to check and say, oh, it's deleted because of this or whatever.
Right. One of the goals we have is also to rewrite the technical documentation a little bit, and maybe
Or at
put
least-
in different format too.
Yeah, reorganize it just so it's easier to slog through.
Yeah, it's a lot of text in there.
If you do that, I'm just thinking about the implications for all the work on the TDR self-audit and links that might go to said technical documentation. Does
Right.
MediaWiki allow it and allow you to redirect all of the legacy links if you modify or change the structure and the content organization?
I know you can for like other wiki pages. So if you rename a page, it's a different link automatically. I don't know if it does with external links. But yeah, that's some work that has to be done.
I'm making a note of that. We'll look into it. Definitely a consideration before we start moving any pieces around. So does anyone have any concerns, feedback on our current work, our progress, our focus, our process? Anything you guys want to get out in the open?
Hey, Andrew, this is Paul from Miami.
Hey, Paul.
I don't know, this isn't really for the technical team, although it's kind of tangential, but I was just wondering about restored bags and people's processes for checking those restored bags. I mean, I came up with a workflow, but it's not the simplest thing in the world. So I was wondering if there was a tool that other people are using, or if anybody had any thoughts about verifying restored bags.
So AP Trust has a command line bag validator. It's on the partner tools page of our wiki. You can take a look at that because that may simplify your process of validating the bag. We were hoping that in some cases, people who are exporting bags from systems where they would need to actually re-import the materials to do a full restore on their end would actually test that process once in a while. Because we want to make sure not only that you're getting back a valid and complete bag, but that you can actually make it meaningful in whatever your internal system is. That's a kind of onerous bit of work to ask of people, and probably you wouldn't want to do that every month. Probably validating the bag is enough, but for your sake and for us to know that we're doing our jobs correctly, it would be nice if at least once in a while you look at that bag restoration as a sort of fire drill where you say to yourself, okay, I've completely lost this object or this collection internally. I just got it back from AP Trust. Can I actually make it available again to my users? And I don't think anyone is yet at the point where they're doing that, but that was part of the vision of doing these test restores, was that depositors would have an understanding of the end-to-end process of restoring something in case things went wrong. So it's not something you have to figure out in a rush the day that something actually does go wrong. But Paul, you may want to post your question on our AP Trust bagging channel on Slack. You can probably get some good feedback from other users there about what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thread to start. I would say also, Andrew, for us, it's not just an issue of validating the bag. We want to validate the bag, and then we want to make sure that it's consistent with the bag we sent.
Right.
Right now, we don't do any updates, so we don't have to worry about that complication. But we do need to figure out what consistency actually means.
Yeah.
There can be slight differences in the information that's in the bag that comes back.
Right. Yeah, there generally will be, just because we regenerate at least one of the tags. And we also, I think we include MD5 and SHA-256 manifests in the bag we send back to you, but in the bags we get from depositors, we typically only get one of those two manifests. So the bag you get back isn't going to be exactly the same, but what's in the payload directory should be the same.
Yes.
I think putting starting a thread in the Slack channel is a good idea. Might mention a couple things here. One, I might encourage people not to use the AP Trust partner tools to do the validation on the restoration check. Kind of just as a check against the tools that create the bag to begin with. You know, I think that's kind of a fair test. Use a different tool than created the bag. Nothing. Just try to start. And the other thing is, you know, even if you can't do the full restore that Andrew's talking about, if you know the bag is valid, give the contents to a colleague and say, can you make sense of this? What would you do with it? You know, and see how they react to it. You know, is another way of viewing that process.
So do you mean like, do they like send back a smiley face or?
No, like what if, when,
Or
the
a wink?
proverbial, you get hit by a bus, and someone's got to deal with this stuff. What are they going to do with it?
I'm just kidding.
Mhm.
They send you back with an angry face. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, and I think to generalize what you said, Nathan, I think, yeah, that what you said at the end, using a different tool, because we haven't used the AP Trust tools to push the content up. So using them on the way back is probably okay.
All right, is there anything else anyone wants to bring up before our spring meeting? All right, if there's nothing else, we will call this meeting done. You can always get in touch with us through Slack or through email at help@aptrust.org. And I hope to see you guys in Notre Dame in 7 weeks or however long it is.
Yeah, thank you guys for all the work.
All right.
Thanks, Andrew, Kelly, Christian, for everything you do. Go AP Trust. Yay.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.